The darkness of space split open like a wound. Blue and white light poured out from the tear in reality, and something massive emerged from the void. The ship was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Black metal stretched for 3 kilometers from nose to tail. Strange markings covered its hull, symbols that belonged to a species most had never heard of. The Defiant had arrived. Captain Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of humanity's greatest creation. His hands rested on the metal railing as he watched the stars through the massive viewing screen. Around him, his crew worked at their stations. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the gentle beeping of computers. "Sir, we have entered the Korvac system," reported Lieutenant Davis from her station. Her voice was steady, but Kane could hear the tension underneath. They all knew what they were facing. Kane nodded slowly. "Show me their fleet." The viewing screen changed. Now it displayed dozens of red dots scattered across the star system. Each dot was an enemy ship. Each ship was filled with creatures who had spent 300 years terrorizing the galaxy. The Korvac Coalition was the most feared military force in known space. "How many ships do you count, Davis?" Kane asked. 212, sir. They have heavy cruisers, destroyers, and carrier ships. Their flagship is the size of a small moon." Kane smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Good. They brought everyone." The crew exchanged glances. 200 ships against one. The odds seemed impossible. But they had not come this far to turn back now. The Coalition had ruled this part of the galaxy for centuries. They took what they wanted from weaker species. They destroyed entire worlds if anyone refused to obey. Millions of beings lived as slaves in their work camps. The Coalition called it order. The rest of the galaxy called it hell. But Earth had been watching, Earth had been learning, and Earth had been building. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Coalition fleet," announced Ensign Roberts from the communications station. "Put it on." "Screen," Kane ordered. The image that appeared made several crew members step back. Admiral Vortex filled the screen with his massive form. His skin was dark red and covered in thick scales. 4 arms extended from his torso, each ending in clawed hands. His head was shaped like a hammer, with small black eyes set deep in bone ridges. "Unknown vessel," Vortex spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "You have entered Coalition space. Without permission, state your business or be destroyed." Kane stepped forward. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate armor worn by the alien admiral. He was just a human, smaller, weaker, and younger than the creature on the screen. But when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of his entire species. "This is Captain Marcus Kane of the Earth vessel Defiant. We have come to discuss the future of this system." Vortex laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. "Earth? I have never heard of this world. You pilot a single ship against the might of the Coalition. Are your people mad?" "Perhaps," Kane replied calmly. "But we are here nonetheless." The alien admiral leaned forward. "Look around you, little human. I command 200 warships. Each one could destroy a planet. My fleet has conquered 1,000 worlds. What can one ship do against such power?" Kane did not blink. "We shall see." Behind Vortex, other Coalition officers appeared on the screen. They were pointing at displays and talking in excited voices. Kane could not understand their words, but he could guess what they were seeing. The Defiant was not like other ships they had encountered. "Your vessel appears to use unknown technology," Vortex said, his tone becoming more serious. "Where did you acquire such capabilities?" "We built them ourselves," Kane answered. This time, Vortex did not laugh. "Impossible. No species develops such technology without our knowledge. We monitor all research in this sector." "You monitor all research in conquered systems," Kane corrected. "Earth is not conquered." The bridge of the Defiant remained perfectly still. Every crew member knew they were making history. Humanity had hidden in the shadows for decades, watching and learning from the species that traveled between stars. They had studied coalition technology, copied what they could, and improved upon what they found. But the Defiant was more than stolen knowledge. It was human engineering at its finest. Every system had been built by human hands. Every weapon had been designed by human minds. Every piece of armor had been forged by human determination. "Sir," Lieutenant Davis called softly, "the Coalition fleet is moving into attack formation." Kane glanced at the tactical display. The enemy ships were spreading out in a wide circle around the Defiant. It was a standard pattern: surround the target and destroy it with overwhelming firepower. "Let them," Kane said. Vortex was still speaking on the main screen. "You interest me, human. Your ship is impressive for a primitive design. I will offer you terms. Surrender now, and your crew will serve as slaves instead of dying. Your technology will advance our cause." "No," Kane said simply. "No?" Vortex sounded surprised. "You refuse our mercy?" "I refuse your tyranny." The alien admiral's expression changed. His small eyes grew cold and hard. "Then you will die like all the others who defied the Coalition. Your ship will become wreckage. Your people will be hunted down and enslaved." Kane stepped closer to the screen. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Admiral Vortex, in 30 seconds, I am going to end this transmission. When I do, you will have one chance to order your ships to stand down. If you do not take that chance, the galaxy will remember this day as the beginning of your end." Vortex roared with laughter. "You threaten me? A single ship threatens the mighty Coalition?" 20 seconds, Kane said. Around the bridge, the crew prepared for battle. Weapon systems powered up with a low whine. Shield generators hummed to life. The Defiant began to accelerate toward the enemy fleet. 10 seconds, Kane announced. Vortex stopped laughing. Something in the human's voice made him pause. For a moment, doubt flickered in his ancient eyes. 5 seconds. The Coalition admiral opened his mouth to speak. Kane cut the transmission. Viewing screen went dark for a moment, then switched to tactical display. 200 red dots surrounded one blue dot in the center. The blue dot was moving forward at increasing speed. "All stations report ready, sir," Davis announced. Kane nodded and settled into his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders. Outside, the most powerful fleet in the galaxy prepared to destroy them. "Take us into the heart of their formation," Kane commanded. "Maximum speed." The Defiant surged forward like a hunting animal. Behind them, Earth waited for news of their success or failure. Ahead of them, the Coalition fleet prepared to fire. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. The silence after the transmission ended lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Admiral Vortex's voice exploded across all communication channels. "All ships, prepare for immediate attack. Target the human vessel and destroy it completely." "Captain." Kane sat calmly in his command chair as the enemy fleet began to move. 200 Coalition ships spread across space like a deadly web. Their weapons were charging, and their shields were powering up. The largest ships moved to the front while smaller vessels took positions on the flanks. "Sir, they are trying to surround us," Lieutenant Davis reported from her station. "Let them," Kane replied. "Open a channel to all Coalition vessels." "Channel open, sir." Kane stood up and faced the main screen. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire star system. Every Coalition ship received his message. Every crew member heard his words. "This is Captain Marcus Kane of Earth. I will say this once, and I will say it clearly. The Coalition has 24 hours to release all enslaved populations under your control. You will withdraw from all occupied territories immediately. You will cease all military operations against civilian targets. This is not a request. This is a demand." The response came quickly. Admiral Vortex appeared on screen again, his scaled face twisted with rage. You dare make demands of the Coalition? We have ruled this sector for 3 centuries. We have destroyed entire species for less insult than this. Kane's expression did not change. 24 hours, Admiral. I will give you 24 seconds before I blast your primitive ship into space dust, Vortex roared. Do you know what we did to the last species that challenged us? We turned their homeworld into glass. We scattered their survivors across a dozen slave camps. I am aware of your methods, Kane said quietly. Then you know your fate. The Coalition does not negotiate with insects. Behind Vortex, other Coalition officers were shouting and pointing at their displays. Kane could see the confusion on their faces. The Defiant was not behaving like other ships they had encountered. Most vessels would be running by now, trying to reach the edge of the system before the Coalition could stop them. Instead, the human ship was accelerating directly toward the center of their formation. Human, Vortex continued, your ship is impressive for a primitive design. But you face the combined might of 12 different species. Our technology has been perfected over millennia. Our weapons can crack moons. Our shields can withstand the heat of stars. Kane nodded politely. Interesting. The simple response seemed to anger Vortex even more. You mock us with your calm? You will learn respect when your ship burns. Perhaps, Kane replied. But my offer stands. 24 hours. Offer? Vortex laughed bitterly. You call threats an offer? Very well, human. I counter with my own offer. Surrender now, and I will kill only half your crew. The rest will serve the Coalition as slaves. Your technology will advance our cause. Kane shook his head slowly. No, no. You refuse our mercy? Admiral, Kane said, his voice becoming colder. You seem to misunderstand the situation. I am not asking for mercy. I am offering it. The Coalition bridge fell silent. For a moment, Vortex stared at the human captain as if he had spoken in an unknown language. Offering mercy? Vortex repeated. To us? To all of you, Kane confirmed. Release your prisoners. Withdraw from occupied space. End your campaign of terror. Do this, and Earth will allow you to live. The laughter that erupted from the Coalition fleet was heard across a dozen star systems. Every ship's communication system carried the sound of 200 captains laughing at the same time. Allow us to live? Vortex gasped between fits of laughter. One ship will allow the Coalition to live? Kane waited for the laughter to die down. When it did, he spoke again. Admiral, you have spent 3 centuries fighting species that could not defend themselves. You have grown used to easy victories against weaker opponents. This has made you careless. Careless? Vortex's eyes narrowed. Explain. You assume that all species follow the same path of development. You believe that military power comes only from size and numbers. You think that because you have conquered others, you are unconquerable. We are unconquerable. Vortex shouted. Name one species that has ever defeated the Coalition in open battle. Kane smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Humanity, you have not defeated us yet, human. No, Kane agreed. Not yet. While the captains argued, the galaxy watched. On 1,000 worlds, beings gathered around communication devices to listen to the impossible conversation. News of the confrontation spread through quantum networks faster than light itself. On the water world of Nereus, the aquatic people dove deep into their oceans, seeking shelter in underwater cities. They had fought the Coalition once and lost everything. Now they hid and prayed that the humans would succeed where they had failed. In the crystal caves of Delany Prime, the peaceful miners sealed their tunnels and waited. They had been among the first species conquered by the Coalition. For 200 years they had dreamed of freedom. On the warrior world of Thanner, The proud fighters sharpened their weapons and prepared for whatever came next. They had resisted the coalition longer than most, but even their legendary skill had not been enough. Across the galaxy, enslaved populations looked up at the stars and dared to hope. Somewhere in the darkness, a single ship from a world called Earth was challenging the masters of space itself. Back in the Korvac system, Admiral Vortex was losing patience. Enough talk, he declared. You want to see coalition power? Watch as we demonstrate it on your pathetic vessel. Kane cut the transmission without another word. The main screen returned to tactical display, showing the positions of all ships in the system. The coalition fleet had completed its encirclement. Heavy cruisers formed the outer ring, while destroyers filled the gaps between them. At the center of the formation, the massive flagship waited like a spider in its web. "Sir," Lieutenant Davis called out, "all coalition ships are targeting us. They have missile locks and energy weapons charged." Kane nodded. "Signal all departments. Prepare for combat operations." Throughout the Defiant, alarms began to sound. Blast doors sealed shut as the ship went to full battle stations. In engineering, the massive reactors hummed with power. In the weapons bays, loading systems moved shells and energy cells into position. "Sir," Ensign Roberts announced from communications, "we are receiving surrender demands from 17 different coalition." "Captains, ignore them," Kane ordered. "Also, sir, we are getting messages from civilian ships throughout the system. They are asking if we really intend to fight the entire coalition fleet." Kane looked at the tactical display one more time. 200 enemy ships surrounded his single vessel. The odds were impossible by any reasonable measure. "Tell them," Kane said quietly, "that Earth keeps its promises." The Defiant continued its approach toward the heart of the enemy formation. Around them, coalition ships adjusted their positions and prepared to fire. The talking was over. Now came the test. The first shot came from the coalition flagship. A massive beam of red energy lanced across space toward the Defiant. It was followed by hundreds more as every ship in the enemy fleet opened fire at once. The space around the human vessel erupted. In light, plasma bolts, energy beams, and explosive missiles converged on a single point. The barrage was so intense that it created a small sun in the darkness. Any normal ship would have been vaporized instantly, but the Defiant was not a normal ship. "Direct hit, sir," Lieutenant Davis reported calmly. "Shields holding at 100%. Captain Kane nodded. Around him, the bridge crew watched their displays with amazement. The enemy weapons were striking their shields and simply disappearing. The exotic energy that powered the Defiant's defenses bent space itself, creating a barrier that no known weapon could penetrate. "Return fire," Kane ordered quietly. The response was immediate and devastating. The Defiant's main gun spoke for the first time. Beams of pure gravitational force reached out across space and touched the nearest coalition ships. What happened next would be remembered for 1,000 years. The enemy vessels did not explode. They did not burn. They simply came apart at the molecular level. Their matter scattered like dust in a wind that no one could see. Admiral Vortex watched in horror from his flagship as 12 of his heavy cruisers ceased to exist in the span of 3 seconds. Where proud warships had been moments before, now there was only empty space and glittering debris. "Impossible," he whispered. The human ship fired again. This time, the plasma cannons joined the gravitational weapons. Bolts of energy hotter than the surface of stars reached out and touched coalition destroyers. The alien vessels melted like ice in fire, their armor flowing away in streams of molten metal. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel," Vortex screamed into his communicator. "Everything we have." The coalition fleet responded with renewed fury. Energy weapons that could level cities focused on the Defiant. Missiles designed to crack planetary surfaces streaked through space. The combined firepower of 200 warships created a storm of destruction around the human ship, and still the shields held. "Sir," Davis announced, "enemy fire is having no effect. Shield strength remains at maximum." Kane stood up from his command chair. "Target their command ships, full power." The Defiant turned like a hunting beast and fixed its weapons on the largest coalition vessels. The gravitational beams reached out again, and 3 more enemy ships simply vanished. There. Crews had no time to scream, no time to send final messages. One moment they existed, the next they were part of the cosmic dust. On board the coalition flagship, panic began to spread. Officers who had never known defeat suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they could not understand. Their sensors showed that the human ship was real, but their weapons could not touch it. "Sir," one of Vortex's officers reported with a shaking voice, "we have lost 30 ships in the first 5 minutes. The human weapons are unlike anything in our databases." Vortex stared at the tactical display. Red dots representing his ships were disappearing one by one. The blue dot marking the human vessel moved through his formation like death itself. "How many ships do we have left?" he demanded. 170, sir. "But some captains are requesting permission to retreat." "No retreat," Vortex roared. "We are the Coalition. We do not run from anyone." But even as he spoke, fear crept into his voice. The human ship was accelerating toward his flagship, destroying everything in its path. Coalition vessels that tried to block its advance were swept aside like leaves in a hurricane. The Defiant's weapons fired again. This time, they targeted a cluster of medium cruisers that had been trying to flank the human ship. The gravitational beams touched them gently, and they came apart in perfect silence. No explosions, no fire, just matter returning to its basic elements. "Sir," another officer called out, "the humans are not just destroying our ships. They are unmaking them. Our scientists cannot explain how this is possible." Throughout the galaxy, other species watched the battle with growing amazement. On worlds that had been conquered by the Coalition, enslaved populations gathered around hidden communication devices and listened to the reports. On Delany Prime, the crystal miners emerged from their caves for the first time in decades. They had always believed that the Coalition was invincible. Now they saw that belief crumble like dust. The aquatic people of Nereus swam to the surface of their oceans and looked up at the stars. For the first time in generations, they allowed themselves to hope. The masters of space were being destroyed by a species they had never heard of. On the warrior world of Thanor, the proud fighters cheered as each Coalition ship disappeared. They had dreamed of revenge for 100 years. Now they watched as strangers from Earth delivered that revenge with terrible efficiency. Back in the battle, the Defiant continued its deadly advance. The human ship moved through the Coalition formation like a blade cutting through cloth. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could even slow it down. "Sir," Davis reported, "half the enemy fleet has been destroyed. The remaining ships are breaking formation." Kane nodded. "Continue firing. Target any ship that does not retreat." The Coalition captains had finally realized the truth. They were not fighting a normal battle. They were fighting something beyond their understanding. Ships that had conquered star systems began to turn and flee, but the Defiant's weapons had incredible range. Coalition vessels trying to escape found themselves caught in gravitational fields that pulled them back into the killing zone. The human ship hunted them down one by one, showing no mercy to those who had shown none to others. Admiral Vortex watched his empire crumble around him. Ship after ship disappeared from his tactical display. Captains who had served him for decades sent desperate final messages before their vessels were torn apart by forces they could not comprehend. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving surrender signals from multiple ships." "Tell them to keep fighting," Vortex ordered. Sir, they are not listening. Captain Rex of the Thunder's Fist says he would rather face court. Marshall then faced the human weapons again. Vortex looked at his display one more time. Of his original fleet of 200 ships, fewer than 80 remained. The human vessel continued to advance, its weapons reaching out to claim more victims. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vortex considered the possibility of defeat. The coalition had never lost a major battle. They had never faced an enemy they could not overwhelm with superior numbers and firepower. But the humans were different. Their single ship had accomplished what entire rebel fleets could not. They had broken the myth of coalition invincibility. The Defiant fired again, and 5 more ships vanished into nothingness. The human vessel continued its approach toward the flagship, unstoppable as fate itself. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Quantum communication networks carried the impossible story to every corner of known space. On 1,000 worlds, beings gathered around screens and communication devices to witness history being made. The coalition's own propaganda channels struggled to explain what was happening. For 3 centuries, they had broadcast messages of their invincible power. Now their reporters stammered and made excuses as they watched their fleet being destroyed by a single ship. "This is Central Command," a coalition news broadcaster announced, with a shaking voice. "We are experiencing technical difficulties with our battle reports from the Korvac system. Please stand by for updates." But other networks picked up the transmission signals. Independent news sources that had hidden for decades suddenly found their voices. The truth could not be stopped. On the mining world of Delaney Prime, the Crystal, dwellers emerged from their underground cities for the first time in 200 years. They had always worked in darkness, afraid to show themselves to coalition patrols. Now they stood in the light and watched the stars. "Is it real?" asked Elder Tam, the oldest of their people. His crystal-like skin reflected the light from there, shone as he stared at the communication screen. "It is real," replied his daughter Lynn. "The humans are destroying them. Ship after ship, the coalition fleet is disappearing. Around them, thousands of Delaney gathered in the Great Cavern." Children who had never seen the surface world listened in wonder as the news continued. For generations, they had been told that resistance was impossible. The coalition was too strong, too advanced, too numerous. Now they learned that strength had limits. In the deep oceans of Nereus, the aquatic people swam to the surface in massive schools. Their blue-green skin shimmered as they broke through the waves and looked up at the night sky. For the first time in living memory, they allowed themselves to dream of freedom. "The humans fight with weapons we do not understand," sang Elder Wave Dancer through the water. The Nereids communicated through sound waves that carried for vast distances through their oceans. They bend space itself to their will. "Can they truly defeat the coalition?" asked a younger voice. "They are doing it now," Wave Dancer replied. "Listen to the reports. Half the coalition fleet is gone. The humans have lost nothing." On the warrior world of Thanner, the proud fighters gathered in their great halls and watched the battle reports with growing excitement. They had resisted the coalition longer than any other species, but even their legendary skill had not been enough. "Look how they fight," said War Chief Blade Runner, his scarred face filled with admiration. "No wasted motion, no hesitation. They strike like lightning and move like wind." His warriors cheered as another coalition ship disappeared from the tactical displays. Each loss for their enemies was a victory for every enslaved species in the galaxy. "The humans fight like true warriors," Blade Runner continued. "They do not seek glory or conquest. They seek justice." But the most important audience was on the coalition worlds themselves. On planets that had grown rich from slave labor and stolen resources, the ruling classes watched their fleet being destroyed with growing terror. On Korvac Prime, the coalition's capital world, emergency meetings were called in the Great Pyramid. That served as their government center. Admiral Vortex's superiors gathered around a massive holographic display that showed the battle in real time. "How is this possible?" demanded Supreme Leader Drax, his forearms gesturing wildly at the display. "We have the largest fleet in the galaxy. We have conquered every species we have encountered." "The humans are different," replied Science Chief. Vel, her insect-like head tilted as she studied the readings. "Their technology operates on principles we do not understand. Their weapons manipulate gravity itself." "Gravity weapons are theoretical," Drax roared. "No species has ever successfully built them." "The humans have," Vel replied quietly. "And their shields bend space-time around their ship. Our weapons cannot touch them because they exist in a slightly different dimension." The leaders fell silent as they watched another wave of their ships disappear. The humans were not just winning the battle, they were rewriting the rules of warfare itself. Back in the Korvax system, the battle continued with methodical precision. The Defiant moved through the remaining coalition ships like a farmer harvesting grain. Each weapon strike was perfectly aimed. Each target was completely destroyed. Captain Kane stood on his bridge and watched the tactical display. More than half the enemy fleet was gone, and the survivors were scattered across the system. Some ships were trying to flee while others attempted desperate final attacks. "Sir," Lieutenant Davis reported, "the Coalition flagship is requesting a private communication channel." Kane nodded. "Put Admiral Vortex on screen." The alien commander appeared on the main display, but he looked very different than before. His red scales had lost their shine, and his small eyes were filled with something Kane had never seen there before: fear. "Human," Vortex said, his voice no longer filled with arrogance. "I wish to discuss terms." The terms were given 24 hours ago, Kane replied calmly. "Release all enslaved populations. Withdraw from occupied territories. End your military campaigns." "That is impossible," Vortex protested. "The Coalition spans dozens of star systems. We cannot simply abandon everything we have built." Kane's expression did not change. "Then you will lose everything you have built." As if to prove his point, the Defiant's weapons fired again. 3 Coalition destroyers that had been trying to escape were caught in gravitational beams and torn apart. Their crews had time for one final scream before their ships became cosmic dust. "You are destroying my fleet," Vortex shouted. "You are destroying my patience," Kane replied. "Surrender now or face complete annihilation." Across the galaxy, enslaved populations held their breath as they listened to the exchange. This was the moment they had dreamed of for centuries. Their masters being forced to beg for mercy. On station after station, in work camp after work camp, beings who had never known freedom dared to believe that change was coming. The mighty Coalition, terror of the galaxy, was being humbled by a species they had never heard of. But the most dramatic moment came when the Defiant turned its attention to something other than the warships. On the edge of the system sat massive orbital stations, the processing centers, where enslaved populations were sorted and shipped to various Coalition worlds. Instead of destroying the stations, something unexpected happened. Small ships launched from the Defiant and headed toward the orbital platforms. The galaxy watched in amazement as human soldiers prepared to board the Coalition's slave processing centers. "They are not just destroying the fleet," whispered Elder Tam on Delaney Prime. "They are going to free the prisoners." For the first time in 3 centuries, the enslaved populations of the galaxy realized that someone was coming to save them. The human shuttles docked with the first orbital station like gentle touches in the darkness of space. Inside those metal structures, thousands of enslaved beings waited in cramped cells, not knowing that their salvation had arrived. Commander James Park led the first boarding team through the station's corridors. His soldiers moved with quiet efficiency, their weapons ready but their mission clear. Liberation, not destruction. They had studied Coalition station layouts for years, preparing for this moment. Section A cleared, Park reported through his communicator. 47 prisoners freed. Mixed species, Delani, Nereid, and Thanari. The rescued beings stared at their human liberators with wonder and disbelief. Many had been prisoners for so long they had forgotten what freedom looked like. The humans spoke gently to them, offering water and medical care. "You are safe now," Park told a young Delani female whose crystal skin had lost its shine from years of poor treatment. "The Coalition cannot hurt you anymore." She looked up at him with eyes that held no hope. "They will come back." "They always come back." Park knelt down to her level. "Not this time. Look outside." Through the station's viewing ports, the debris of the Coalition fleet drifted in space like a metal graveyard. Where 200 warships had once commanded the system, now only scattered pieces remained. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was nothing but scrap. Metal and fading energy. Captain Kane watched the liberation operations from the bridge of the Defiant. His ship had positioned itself at the center of the system, its mere presence a guarantee that no Coalition reinforcements would interfere with the rescue mission. "Sir," Lieutenant Davis reported, "we have freed over 12,000 beings from the 6 orbital stations. The medical teams report that most are in poor condition but will recover." Kane nodded. "And Admiral Vortex?" "His flagship is still holding position near the system's edge. He has not attempted to flee or attack." Kane studied the tactical display. The Coalition Admiral's ship sat alone in space, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet. It was a powerful vessel, larger than most space stations, but it made no move to escape or fight. "Open a channel to the flagship," Kane ordered. Admiral Vortex appeared on the main screen. The proud commander who had boasted of his invincible fleet now looked broken and defeated. His scaled skin had turned a dull gray, and his 4 arms hung limply at his sides. "Human," Vortex said quietly, "you have won." Kane remained standing. "The battle is over, Admiral. But the war for freedom has just begun. What do you want from us?" "I told you 24 hours ago. Release all enslaved populations. Withdraw from occupied territories. End your campaigns of conquest." Vortex stared at the human captain for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited in silence. These were officers who had never known defeat, soldiers who had conquered star systems. Now they looked to their leader for guidance in a situation they had never imagined. "If we agree to your terms," Vortex said slowly, "what happens to the Coalition?" Kane's expression softened slightly. "That depends on your choices. Species that choose freedom over slavery, cooperation over conquest, will find Earth willing to work with them. Those who continue the old ways will face the consequences. And my fleet?" Kane gestured toward the debris field that surrounded them. "Your fleet is gone, Admiral. But your people do not have to follow it into destruction." Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched this exchange. On every world, in every system, the message was clear. The age of Coalition terror was ending. First to respond were the liberated populations themselves. On the orbital stations, freed prisoners were already organizing councils to decide their future. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the largest station's meeting hall. "We must work together," declared Elder Tan, who had been brought up from Delany Prime to help coordinate the liberation. "For too long, we have been divided by fear. Now we must be united by hope." A Thanari warrior named Steelclaw stepped forward. "The humans have given us a gift beyond price, our freedom. How do we repay such a debt?" "By using that freedom wisely," replied Wave Singer, a Nereid who had survived 20 years in Coalition prison camps. "By building something better than what came before." The discussion continued for hours as representatives from each species shared their thoughts. They had different languages, different cultures, different ways of life. But they all shared one thing: gratitude to the humans who had broken their chains. Meanwhile, Captain Kane prepared to address the entire galaxy. The Defiance communication systems reached across space, carrying his message to every world with quantum receivers. "People of the galaxy," Kane began, "today marks the end of one age and the beginning of another. The Coalition's reign of terror is over, but Earth seeks no empire to replace it. On 1,000 worlds, beings gathered to listen. Even on Coalition planets, populations that had grown fat on slave labor now faced an uncertain future. We offer protection to those who choose freedom," Kane continued. "We extend our hand in friendship to species that seek cooperation over conquest. But we will not tolerate the strong preying upon the weak." Admiral Vortex listened to the broadcast from his flagship. Around him, his remaining officers waited for orders that he was no longer sure how to give. "Sir," one of them finally asked, "what are your commands?" Vortex looked at the tactical display one more time. His fleet was gone. His empire was crumbling. His people faced a choice between adaptation and extinction. "Send the surrender signal," he said quietly. The message went out across Coalition space. On dozens of worlds, Coalition governors received the same order: lay down arms and prepare for negotiations. Some obeyed immediately. Others tried to resist. But resistance proved futile when more human ships began arriving in Coalition systems. Earth had not sent just one battleship to the galaxy. The Defiant was merely the first of many. Within days, Coalition control collapsed across entire sectors. Species that had been enslaved for generations found themselves free to choose their own destiny. Some chose to rebuild their old civilizations. Others decided to join the growing alliance of liberated worlds. The Korvax system became the symbol of the new age. Where Coalition prisoners had once suffered in orbital camps, now representatives from dozens of species worked together to build a better future. Captain Kane stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched as the former prison stations were converted into meeting halls and cultural centers. Beings who had been enemies under Coalition rule now worked side by side. "Sir," Lieutenant Davis reported, "we are receiving alliance requests from 43 different systems. They all want Earth's protection and partnership." Kane smiled as he watched a group of young beings from different species playing together in the station's common area. They did not see the differences that had once divided their peoples. They saw only friends. "Accept them all," Kane said. "Earth keeps its promises." The galaxy had trembled in fear, but not of conquest. It had trembled at the power of justice, and that made all the difference.